fine, I'm sure.
Margaret and the ladies in the tunnel, but we're all here and present now. My name's Dave Neary. I'll be chairing this event today, so thank you very much for attending. Up on the top table, my colleagues, Rick, Michael, Margaret. Could I just ask that we put mobile phones onto the silent or airplane or whatever. I'm sure Michael doing okay. So today's speakers and format. I'm going to do a brief introduction. Hopefully you've not come to listen to me. Then it'll be Rich for about 15 minutes or so. Then colleague of ours, Noreen, will make a brief interjection. Then Rick, round about for about 10 minutes. Michael for about 10 minutes. Response from Margaret for about 15 minutes or so. And then we'll take question and answer session at the end, probably about 25 minutes or so, given the lateness of our start. Hopefully we finished round about 4:30, 4:45, something like that. Okay, next slide, please, Michael. My job is to tell you a little bit about the Reinvest project, in that this is a 12-country, 19-institution research project that the Paul Temple has been involved in for nearly 4 years now. It's coming to its end, and the Paul Hope over this project has been involved in 3 ways of in-depth empirical research to explore the lived experience of people experiencing mental health difficulties in terms of the impact of austerity. So wave 1 was looking at the impact of austerity on mental health services, particularly around day centres. Wave 2 was the impact of welfare reform, mostly the impact of bedroom tax and all the other various elements of welfare reform. And the third wave was around the marketisation of mental health services and the impact that that has had on services and workers. As you can see, it's a multi-work package strand. Our work packages were work package 3, 5 and 6. And it's under the ambit of Reinvest, social investments in the post-crisis era to restore social solidarity and strengthen social welfare provision in this era. This is the brief overview, phase 1, 2 and 3, welfare reforms, which will be covered by my colleagues Rich and Michael. And I will therefore hand over to Rich.
Yeah. Okay, so thanks very much for that. So I'm going to talk about...
Rich. Don't sing.
I'm not going to sing yet. Okay, so I'm going to talk about some of the data we collected for the first and second stage. And then Michael, when he does his talk, is going to talk about the third stage of data collection. So I'm going to be talking about the impact of austerity and then also the impact of welfare reforms. So so this is an overview here. We're going to look at, there were 3, in the first stage there were 3 major areas that people drew attention to that were having a significant impact on their experience. And this stage of data collection, our participants were people who were service users, so welfare service users. And the 3 areas that came out very strongly were the bedroom tax, collective community spaces such as day centres and the impact of austerity cuts on those, and the impact of welfare reforms. So I'm going to come and, so in our second stage of research we looked in more detail at welfare reforms, but I'm going to talk about the impact of austerity first. So, I mean, this gives a sense of, and what I've done on these slides is I've put quotes on there. And I think those quotes, I mean, I can talk around those issues, but I think that people's own testimony about their experience is very powerful. So I'd invite you just to take a look at these quotes, just to get a sense of what our participants were describing to us about both the value of those collective community spaces such as day centres, the way in which a kind of social approach, I guess you could say, that these spaces were not just about kind of individualised medical approach, but about collective mutual support alongside skilled professional support. A range of tasks and relationships that were supported there. But the way that those kinds of spaces were being significantly impacted by austerity measures, which meant that the participant here was describing how there used to be 20 or so day centres across Liverpool, and as a result of austerity cuts and cuts over recent years, those are reduced to 2 or 3 centres. So a very kind of significant impact on those centres. And I think the other thing to say about the kind of provision that's left as well is that part of the philosophy of services has moved away from a more kind of long-term community and relational types of support to very short-term, what we call kind of recovery and re-ablement type models. And one of the issues with those is that in effect what it's saying to service users is you've got 6 weeks to recover. And as we know, I mean, for some people 6 weeks may be appropriate, but for many people that is completely inappropriate. And so those kind of models have kind of added to the pressure on people, the pressure on service users, have undermined that opportunity to build those kind of collective communal networks of support. The other area that we wanted to talk about with this stage of research that came through very powerfully is the role of the bedroom tax. And I think I'm going to invite you again to read this quote, because again this is thinking about the role of community, the role of relationships in mental health recovery. What I mean by it's genuine mental health recovery, rather than this kind of conception of recovery, which actually we would argue, and I know Rick's going to talk about this a little bit more, that the recovery model in some senses has been used as a means, as a cover for cuts, I think, a cover for limiting access to services. And that was something very powerfully came through from our research participants. So, these kind of social networks and social relationships are incredibly important. And what this participant was talking about is the way that having to move home because of the bedroom tax had meant that his kind of social networks of support had been severely undermined, and that had a significant impact on his own mental health. And so what we're seeing here is a set of policies which are actually causing exacerbating mental distress, rather than supporting people, rather than creating social security, they're creating social insecurity. So the third area that we want to move on to, and became the focus of the second stage of our research, is the impact of welfare reform. Now, what we want to argue is the result of the data we collected, and we collected data with people who were welfare recipients their claim was on the basis of their mental health needs, or at least mainly or in part because of their mental health needs. We also interviewed welfare rights advocates as well, so those were our participants for this stage. And I think there have been a number of forms of evidence which have kind of raised awareness of the cruel and draconian nature of this government's welfare reform programme, the programme that we've seen since 2010. But what we wanted to do with this is to think about what the nature of those processes are. We actually developed the term benefits distress to describe the impact of these reforms. That we think that the benefits and welfare system reforms are a cause of and an exacerbation of both cause and exacerbate mental distress. That's what we want to argue with this research. So we wanted to unpack what the kind of mechanisms, what the processes are through which those reforms become these kind of causes of mental distress, these causes. So the first one that came through, that people will, I think most people will probably be aware of the work capability assessment. So what we looked at is 2 welfare benefits, employment and support allowance and personal independence payments, which are both, I think about right, saying 50% of ESA claimants experience mental distress, so part of their claims on the basis of mental distress, and about 36% of PIP claimants. So people with mental health needs are a high proportion of the claimants for these benefits. Now what we see in the work capability assessment is the assessment that was introduced, and we can see the kind of ethos behind that there in the title of that assessment. So this is the medical test for ESA benefit, and it's work capability assessment. So you immediately see that the focus on welfare to work. The processes through which people's capability for work are assessed cause a number of kind of harmful outcomes, and we want to draw attention to 5 or 6 of these in particular. The first of these is someone, the participant here is describing their experience of a work capability assessment and how it re-traumatised him. So he says that, that in his, several years ago he made a suicide attempt, and he was asked in his work capability assessment to go into detail about that. So this is not to talk about this experience in a context where kind of support is going to be offered, where there's going to be therapy, where it's a process of working through that experience. This is in a context where, as we know, many people are, it's a process of, many people feel creating barriers to the receipt of benefit rather than supporting people to access things that are their right. So this is a very insensitive and intrusive form of questioning that people describe in these. So being asked to relive deeply traumatic life events without any support being offered. Another factor within these assessments is the invalidation of testimony. So our participants talked about not only, two things, both the invalidation of their own testimony, so feeling that they're not being believed, feeling that because mental distress is not always visible in an assessment, being challenged to kind of prove over and over again that their experiences were real, not being believed, not feeling not being able to trust in the system, not feeling believed. This was an atmosphere of disbelief and suspicion was something that came through very powerfully. And I think this is reinforced by government. I mean, I think we'll know, I think some people may know about the head of the number 10 policy unit, so Theresa May's policy unit, who talked about people with mental distress as being not really disabled. So this is the kind of atmosphere we see within the government of kind of invalidation. We don't believe you, we don't trust you, you have to kind of prove over and over again your right to access this. And what was interesting as well about this is it's not only people's own testimony being disbelieved, but people talking about the way that medical evidence was increasingly being disregarded in processes as well. So it's kind of almost, it's like, in effect, invalidating all forms of testimony that can provide evidence to support access to these benefits. So this, so re-traumatization, invalidation of testimony, those were the first two that we wanted to draw attention to. The third one is this process of entrapment. And there was a story that one of the welfare rights advocates told us, and that is that one of their claimants had to go to a neighbouring town to have their assessment. And they were saying that, in effect, they were in a double bind, because if they didn't go to the assessment, because it's too far to travel, it would be too distressing, they were seeing that, that would invalidate their claim. Basically they didn't attend their assessment, so they wouldn't be eligible for this benefit. However, if they do go and attend, it's evidence that they don't have the level of mental distress which prevents them from travelling and engaging with that process. So people are caught in a double bind here, which is deeply, if anyone kind of goes back to I.D. Lang, the kind of, and Gregory Bateson, the role of kind of double binds, if you like, in creating mental distress. You're kind of damned if you do and damned if you don't. So people are kind of caught in this kind of terrible Kafkaesque kind of space here. And someone else said, the system is designed to trip up. It's not designed to see, are you well enough to work or not? So there's a sense that, kind of suspicion and barriers pervading this process. Another thing is a sense of fear which pervades every stage of this process. you know, the phrase fear of the brown envelope is central. That terror that people have that the brown envelope will come through the door, you know, telling them they have to be reassessed for their benefits, and so on, and the way that that impacts on people, the incredible harm that that does, the fear of sanctions within the system as well. The threat of surveillance as well. I mean, there's I was reading recently that kind of Sainsbury's has a policy of sharing their CCTV footage if they're required to do so from public agencies like the DWP. So it sounds, you know, like, you know, some kind of conspiracy work, but Sainsbury's has a policy of sharing video footage. So this sense that people are in this kind of panopticon space where you're kind of under surveillance, and the kind of distress, the levels of distress that can create a kind of compulsory visibility and constant threat that people feel under through this system. So instilling fear and shaming and blaming. So the last two of these kind of processes that our participants describe to us, shaming and blaming. So this idea that you know, you feel a sense of shame that the stigmatising atmosphere around the welfare system, or this rhetoric of strivers and skivers, of deserving and undeserving, has a very toxic effect on people's sense of self. People feel a sense of shame about being a benefits recipient, and the way that that impacts on people's levels of self-esteem and their mental health. So significant impact. But we were seeing something else that was taking that even further, and that was a sense not only of shame, but also of blame. So on top of shame, there's a sense that if you're not working, if you're unwell, it's your fault somehow. You're to blame for that. And this has been, in a sense, reinforced by what critics have called psychocompulsion. So it's the idea that, you know, in a sense, if people are unemployed, it's because of their psychological deficits, not because there aren't decent jobs out there. So it's a way of blaming the individuals, blaming the people who are most affected and most marginalised in this society for the conditions they're facing. So this sense of blame is has incredibly powerful effects. One person described being sent to DWP workshops around their attitude, around their approach to looking for work, and so on, and called them blame workshops. So I thought it was a very powerful term, blame workshops. You know, because you feel like it's my fault that I'm in this position, not something to do with the system itself, the labour market and the benefit system and so on. So this sense that not only do you have to change what you do, so this increased conditionality in the system is not only about changing what you do, how many jobs you apply for and so on, it's about changing actually who you are, what kind of person, what your psychological dispositions are. So it's incredibly intrusive set of ideas here which are being imposed on people who are benefit recipients. So we felt, this quote we felt summed up very powerfully what we mean. So what we're arguing is those 6 processes combine to create this effect that we call benefits distress. So it links mental distress specifically to people's experience within the welfare system. And this person, this service user participant in the study said that I know a few people who've taken their lives because of these reforms. I've been to their funerals. I think it's wrong to do that to people who are already vulnerable and hurting and struggling. I think this is what we need to draw attention to here. We need a social security system, not a benefits distress producing system. We are seeing, our research is tied into a number of other sources of knowledge that we have about the direction of travel within the welfare system. We know from the Philip Alston's the UN Special Rapporteur's report on poverty recently, talked about a cruel and inhuman benefit system. So I think increasingly there's visibility, the harsh and draconian effects of this system are becoming increasingly visible, but it's important that we think about what we can do politically to create change, to challenge these processes, and to have a different set of policies, and that's why it's great that Margaret's here, and hopefully you can hear about that Labour is going to be doing something different. Hopefully once you're in power very soon. So I wanted to just before I end, I thought it would be worth. In the first part of my presentation, I talked about day centres, and there are a number of people here, survivor service users, who has had the privilege to be involved in campaigning alongside to challenge the outsourcing and closure of day services in Liverpool. And this is a quote from one of our participants who talked about the effects of being involved in campaigning and resistance. And I think I'd like to finish on the last part of this quote here. It says, the more voices you can add and the more alliances you can build, the more powerful you can become. And then there's hope, and that's what we all need at the end of the day. So I thought that would be a great way and a positive way to finish what's a very difficult story about the nature of the welfare system at the moment. So thank you.
On that final point of resistance, I'd like to call from the floor a colleague of ours, Maureen, who will give us a brief outline of practical resistance.
Very brief. So I got to know Rich through campaigning against welfare reform, and along the way I did become a member of the Labour Party, and it does feel that within the Labour Party that we are having a shift. So for example, the 5 constituencies across Liverpool, so Riverside, Garston and Halewood, Walton, Wavertree and West Derby, they all supported us in setting up an action group that's now connected to the Labour Party, and our position is a very much stop and scrap universal credit. So that's the new benefit system. So we do have a banner now that was kindly paid for us by people who are supporting us, and we are going to be on Bow Street tomorrow morning on the National Day of Action for Unite. So our next meeting is in Smithdown Social Club on the 4th, so that's next Tuesday, 2A Crawford Avenue, so Smithdown Social Club. And we're very much grassroots focused. It will be a very practical meeting of sitting around in a circle and coming up with practical action ideas that we can do in order to tackle this. So the more people we have on board, the better with that.
What time was that?
So 6 p.m. on the 4th.
You don't have to be a Labour Party member.
Exactly, yeah. You don't have to be a Labour Party member. We did enforce that almost, that it's supported by the Labour Party, but at the same time still grassroots led.
And tomorrow is the day you mentioned something?
Is between 11 and 2 on Bow Street. So it's the Unite Day of Action, but it's it's everyone's day of action against universal credit. Yeah, we actually are called Merseyside Stop and Scrap, and we are trying to make that.
Sounds like a job for somebody there.
Yes, indeed, the more alliances we make, true.
Are you also against work capability assessments, good assessments, DSA appeals?
Yeah, absolutely. So tonight, actually, because the council's position at the moment is kind of a stop and fix position, well, and because that's everyone's trying to do their bit. But I know at our CLP meeting tonight we are having a debate about that. So there's someone from the council who will speak up to stop and fix, and I'm covering a stop and scrap, and definitely I'm going to be mentioning work capability assessments there.
What practical steps that we can all take in terms of taking action against this? Right, our next speaker I shall hand over to Rick. Either Rick or Michael.
Hello.
I feel like I'm on the set of a reboot of The Shining.
It's going to be thrilling, I'm sure. First of all, I think this is, from the summary, so it's like a pretty damn good report. Very perceptive. The fact that you've literally got the phrase fear of the brown envelope in there shows that you've actually talked to people, because that's what it's all about. Sunday's the only good day of the week. There's no posting Sundays. And the categories, I think, are pretty useful. The concept of benefits to stress, I think that is very good. Certainly any meeting you have, any planning things you do, usually the first third of it are just people sharing stories of trauma. And to that, I'd say, fundamentally what's happened is we've been gaslighted by the British state through various systems, through the DWP, through the Department of Health, and through the media, who are very happy to peddle attacks on disabled people, on service users, in order to stigmatise us, in order to remove sympathy for us, so that when they did these horrible policies, no one would bat an eye with it. Certainly, in mental health, the concept, obviously one of the groups I'm in is called Recovery in the Bin, so we're not that keen on recovery. Nice idea when it started out, now being co-opted into neoliberalism. And by and large, they're contracting the period of time that you're going to get any help in, and basically for almost any pathway, any condition, whatever cluster, whatever all that stuff, it's the work cure. Work is the outcome, which also has an implication. You're not a valuable human being unless you're earning money, and that also comes through in how the DWP treat you. Basically, it's a very difficult system to navigate, deliberately so. And if you don't get through it, if you don't manage it, really the answer from the British state is you are kindly invited to fuck off and die. Okay. But as to resistance, okay, quick example, right? And I always get this name wrong, so I've written it down. Tees, S, and Weir Valley NHS Mental Health Foundation Trust. Yes, got it. They had a crisis house. It was lovely. I got pictures of it. And it had cushions and sofas and tea making, and it was really nice. And so one of my members was in crisis. That's going voluntarily admission. We wouldn't put her in the crisis house. She wants to go in the crisis house. Didn't put her in there. While she was where she was, another person said, "No, you wouldn't put me in the crisis house either." So we got a bit suspicious. So we started digging. And did a bit more. We found out it was a crisis house. In 6 months, no one had been referred to at all. It was there to show, we're great, we've got a crisis house, but we've not resourced it at all, we've not got any staff there, no one was sent there. So, luckily, their CEO valued their public reputation on Twitter. And we said, "Hi, about this crisis house, how about referring some patients to it?" And he said, "What do you mean?" "Well, you haven't for 6 months, have you?" I said, "Shit." The epilogue to that story is my friend subsequently found himself in the crisis house, and we can't work out whether that is a victory or not. But you can do things, can change things. The important thing about that is organise. Person on their own, the system is built to screw over individual complaints. You'll never get anywhere on your own. That's the bad news. Good news is, organised, they can't deal with that. So, and then to go back to the political, the wider national scene, I saw Margaret yesterday, we were at the ESA roundtable invited by John McDonnell in Westminster. That's a great initiative. That's the highest level contact disability, mental health users, grassroots have had with an opposition party in living memory. So hopefully some good stuff comes from that. But we should not rely on government, we should not rely on big solutions from political parties. They have other pressures they have to meet. Funders, lobbyists, the civil service, who don't like change, and at the moment on universal credit, tend to say, well, we started it, so we have to finish it. By the way, stop and scrap universal credit, without question. So it's important to organise yourself, get together, find pressure points, analyse things, think strategically, and improve things on your local level. Because, you know, even if you get a great government that do loads of great things, that's a bonus. But if you don't, you've still built that network, you've still done some improvements yourself. And just winding up, I think the main thing to remember about all of this is the government attacked us. It's not our fault. They're to blame. They will get defeated one day. And I rather hope some of them are going to be made to pay, certainly in the courts.
Thank you for that. Come to our penultimate speaker now, Michael. Will you be okay doing slides? It's my colleague, Professor Michael Lavalette. He shall speak for about 10 minutes.
Yeah, some of my students have given up with 5 slides, and 5 slides is usually an hour, so I'll try and keep this to 10 minutes. So the third wave, I'm going to talk about the third wave of research that we did with Reinvest, and I think there's 2 things that are quite unique about this, the research project that we've been involved in. There are other projects who have listened to the voice of service users and the impact of cuts in service users. And there are some projects that have looked at the impact of cuts and austerity on workers in particular fields, but there's very rarely projects that look at both at the same time. But that's one of the things that we were trying to do. The other thing is that it's not uncommon to find people doing research on benefits, or research on NHS, or benefits in social care, or research on social care, but again, it's unusual to have a project which allows you to look at the intersections between welfare benefits, NHS, social care, and their impact. So, in both those, I think this is quite an unusual, it's quite fortunate to get money for 4 years and to do those things at that level. So I'm going to be talking about the third wave. Now, in the third wave, we were really looking at the impact of welfare transformation on NHS and social care systems, and the impact of that of those changes on workers on the front line. And I wanted to start off with my first slide. I've got lots of little quotes here, and you might see too many of them, but I wanted to give you a flavour of the impact that these changes are making on workers, and I want to put that in a broader context. I'm a social work lecturer at Liverpool Hope, and every year we have to interview hundreds of people who want to go into our social work course. We've got 500 applications, we only have 25 places, and that's just at the BA. We have about 250, we've got 25 places in the MA. So we spend lots of time interviewing potential social work students. And when you ask them a question, why do you want to do social work? They say, I want to help people, whatever that may be, but that's their motivation. I have never, ever come across somebody who's applied for a social work course whose starting point has been because I want to ration people's care in a care package. I've never had that. But yet, the transformation that is taking place in the welfare system is that these are quotes from workers in the system. We, meaning the system, this is Ben, we the system are more managerial. We don't provide care anymore, we manage care. Our team, it's just tiny compared to what it used to be. In fact, we have days now that the office shuts because there's just not enough people in the building. There's a shrinkage of staff. Our life is dominated by targets. The bureaucracy and targets are the goals of practice rather than meeting service users' needs. This is a quote from a service user. For all the rest of your workers, but here's Emma. There is so much pressure on staff for these ridiculous targets that they're pressured. We, the service users, pick up on that. So the whole system is damaging, failing, and toxic. Kathy, the electronic patient record system is there for the town in the north finance department. It's more about the finance department. That's all it's for. It's all about payment by results. It's not a system for us, it's a system for them. And then with Dawn, marketisation is all about counting things so you can sell it. If you can't count it, you can't sell it, can you? If you can't barcode it, you can't sell it. That's the rationale for having all these other people being counting us and monitoring our activities. So one of the things I want to start off by saying is that when we look at welfare cuts, and we look at the impact of austerity, obviously it's those at the absolute sharp edge of that axe are service users and what's happening to their lives. But not far behind them is the significant transformation that is taking place on workers rights and workers' conditions and their understandings of what they should be doing in their jobs. The social workers, nurses, community psychiatric nurses, they go in to these jobs with some sense of public service, with some sense that they're going to help people, but the transformations that we are witnessing are reducing the space for acting and service users for benefit service users, and undermining what they consider to be their professional roles. Now, you might think that that's a more complex phrase to use, but that's how they see it, what they've been trained to do. The value judgments that shape their professions are being squeezed by the pressures of targets, of austerity, and of cuts in this way. And those changes, those quotes, I think, sort of give you a flavour of the vast number of things that workers will say to us about what the problem with the modern welfare state really is for them. One of the things they talked about, and one of the things I think is really important for people in nursing and social work, is what they identified as the distancing of services. This is Leah, she was in an adult social care team, and she said, well, what we do is service specification or care needs. So this is a kind of free market idea where, you put these service specs out and then the market bids on them. Whereas it used to be a thing that you'd have contacts and links with different organisations and services that you might phone up. But now you don't get to do that. You're not even allowed to do that kind of thing. It goes to a commissioner and then they send it out and you simply get the feedback. So what this means is that social workers go out and do an assessment. They don't have as much time to do the assessment as they used to have. They then go back into their work where they are confronted with a computer and a form that they have to fill in. The form will be pages and pages long, but it doesn't really allow them to tell the story of the person that they're working with. It's all a tick box requirement. Then they press a button, the button goes to the commissioner. They're not allowed to speak to the commissioner. If they get a response from the commissioner that says, oh, you've overestimated what is needed here, you've exaggerated people's costs, that will come back from the commissioner for them to rewrite it again. If they disagree, they can only go to their manager because they're not allowed to pick up the phone to talk to the commission themselves. And so you've got this kind of double distancing. You've got the growth of distance between the service user and the social worker, and then you've got the social worker and the commissioner where there's an absolute barrier, and then the commissioner is the one that puts services out to tender. I kind of think that this is like, this might seem very dramatic, but when the Americans now bombed Afghanistan and Iraq, very often the people that press the button are sitting in Washington, and it's like a computer game, because the further you distance people from the consequences of your action, the colder you are to carry these things through. So that notion of distancing is about giving that, so the commissioners can make very hard decisions, because they don't have to deal with the consequences, they don't have to speak to people, they don't have to actually relate to what the consequences of their decisions are making. So this is very, 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 very strong in a number of the workers in a number of different areas we're talking this through. Bridget was saying the same. She said, we usually actually get people to sign their own care forms because that's what's the ethos, getting people involved, working with them together. But we don't do that. That's so 90s. We don't do that anymore. We provide the care plans, we write the forms, we deliver it in that basis. And one of the things that I did want to say was that in a number of interviews that we carried out with workers, that they knew that this wasn't really what they wanted to do. In fact, for some of them, this was developing what we might call ethical stress, because they came into the profession thinking that they were going there to help people, that they would do certain things in a certain way. They were being closed down and restricted in what they were allowed to do, and they felt bad. This isn't what I came into social work to do. This isn't what I came into nursing to do. And increasing numbers of them would say, well, actually, I still do as much as I can. So here we get Kathy, you try and keep working with people. But what you find is that they keep on working with people essentially on their own time. So you have workers now who are working incredible hours because they have the cases to do, but if they want to do real social work or real nursing, they have to fit that in, but that extends their days. They don't finish at 6 or 7, but sometimes at 8, sometimes at 9 o'clock at night. And when they get caught, then they get themselves into trouble. So here's Kathy, I get into trouble all the time because I'm doing what I think is social work. And that's a totally bizarre situation that we've got ourselves into here. The other thing that we found that a number of the nurses and social workers was doing were getting involved in what we might call gaming. And this is really strange notion that's going out. So this income scale. So here's Bridget. A lot of the questions in the form are completely irrelevant. It's a tick box. It makes no difference to the person you're working with. You just have to score them, and you have to get them a score on the Health of the Nation outcome scale, and trust them to submit these figures so that they hit the targets, because if they hit the targets, they can get some money through these things. But you know that the outcome is what will be the impact on the service users, the person you're working with. So there's an inbuilt tendency, as the levels of care or as the levels of distress increase, there's a tendency for the workers to exaggerate how ill people are, because that's the only way that they know that they will get some kind of service at the end of it. So here's Lee. Your incentive is to make service users much, much more unwell than they are, because otherwise you could be discharged. Okay? So you have this sort of gaming system in which social workers and nurses and community psychiatric nurses are working to try and game the system as a way of making sure that the basic care that they think those that they're working with need can get through the targets and the thresholds for support in that way. The other thing we picked up is that in the current atmosphere, where everybody's told that the cuts are so severe, we really don't have the money, that one of the things that some of the workers started to point out or argue was that effectively service users started to internalise austerity and internalise the cuts. So here's Denise saying that you get people who are really depressed and they think they're trapped, they have really low self-esteem, and you ask how they are, and they say, well, I'm not too bad. There's people who are worse off than me. And so in the tick box, they score lowly because it's asking you to report how you're reporting. So they're getting low scores even though you know that they're quite ill, but that's because they're comparing themselves to this mythical everybody's much, much worse than me because there's no money, somebody else is there that's better than me, and whatever. And then the other thing that he says is that actually part of the therapy might be about getting people to acknowledge how unhappy they are and to stop writing that off as not lasting. And so you might get people to increase their numbers in scoring, and actually that's successful therapy, to recognise how well you are in the context, to increase your scale of score. But that becomes a black mark for you and the team, because now you are increasing the demands in the service, and that's a bad thing to do from your employer's point of view, even though it might be a good thing to do to support the person who's in need at that time. A big theme from all the workers was that that all of this leads to what they saw as an attack on professional discretion. Discretion can work in all various different ways, but classically in social work and nursing, there was always some resources, there was always some room for you to act in a way that was supportive of those that you were working with. And the feeling that under the target-driven system, under marketisation, under a computer-driven system, the scope for people to make those decisions has been narrowed down very, very greatly. So large numbers of workers said that they now had a very narrow space for them to work autonomously to their values as professionals in this way. And here's Lisa, this is what she says. She said, they've trained us and we know what they're doing, but they have sort of guidelines which shape how the forms have to be filled in, regardless of what the patient actually experiences. And the illness isn't following that model, but you have to follow the model because these things are being measured and they're being dictated, and red flags will start to flow up in the system. So that's narrowing down the space and the way these things go. And so the final thing really is that you sometimes get people who say that markets are efficient and they're just a way of leading to resources going to where they're needed. And I'm sure there's probably not many people in this room who think that that's the right starting point, but I actually want to argue the reverse. That marketisation in health and social care and the impact on the welfare system hasn't made efficiencies, it's leading to inefficiencies, it's leading to chaos in the market system, to things that don't make any sense even from their point of view. So I'll just give you dates that I'm running out of time. So I'll give you one example from Joanna. This was in East Town, so it's another northern town, it wasn't another, because that's what that means. So our bed manager, so this is the hospital where there's a shortage of beds for those who are being referred to health teams. So our bed manager is told to keep some, and these are what they're called fundraising beds within the NHS. Okay? So what this means, they're told to hold them back. So what this effectively means, I suppose, talking about, is that within this system, You might have people who are ill who need a bed in the hospital in your town, and you might be lucky enough to get a bed, but there might not be a bed, even though there are empty beds in the hospital. And the reason for that is because the empty beds are identified as fundraising beds, because the hospital trusts know that the next authority or another hospital in another part of the country will be desperate for a bed, and they will pay top dollar to use the fundraising bed, and this has been identified as an income stream for the trust within the system. Right? So yes, it's utterly appalling, but in a sense it is the logic of marketisation and sending these things out and trying to get profit within the system. So, the last thing, Rich finished with some resistance, and we wanted to do that because we were very aware that you could come along here and listen to a whole series of quotes and go out feeling, oh God, isn't things really terrible? And so I wanted to end with a couple of examples of resistance. So Rich talked about the campaigns before and the service users, but these were some of the examples that we got from some of the workers. So in one of the teams that we talked to, the workers really were spent most of their day, about 95% of their time, as social workers, sitting in front of a computer, filling in forms, and right. So all that notion of social work being an occupation where you work with people with a relationship problem, all of that completely gone. We're primarily sitting there working on the computer. And so what they started to do is to reinforce the people that at that stage work in which we expected. They described it almost like a tele centre, a call centre, and that we're constantly on the computer. Then we should start to react in ways that are very much like trade unions. So they enforce lunch breaks. We don't have lunch at our computer anymore. They enforce lunch breaks. They enforce breaks during the afternoon. And at 5 o'clock they turn the computer off, because if you're going to treat us like workers rather than professionals who can make decisions, then we will react in an appropriate way, because we don't get paid after 5 o'clock, we turn them off and we go out. And so, in this one workplace, there's a very strong trade union consciousness that we like has developed in the back of what's happening here. But sometimes social workers use their values in a way to challenge what's happening. And this is, I think, my favourite example of this. This was with regard to community treatment orders. And this was, again, this wasn't another book, but this is another Northern town. But this was community treatment orders where psychiatrists were just trying to impose those. And so the social work team, the social work team said that they wouldn't just rubber stamp treatment orders as they were expected to by those in the healthcare system. They would refuse to do that. And so the team decided that collectively, we're not just going to rubber stamp what the psychiatrists are doing. They make the psychiatrists come to the team to explain why they're putting they want a community treatment order. You have to argue your case why you think that's the right way forward and to see if it's justified. And that we've tried to operate some kind of mitigation in a collective way as a social work team, that the model isn't medically driven, because the drive is increasingly system us towards medicalisation and medical ways of thinking about these problems. And so they using that sort of collective power that they have as approved mental health practitioners to try and enforce the basic criteria that they've got. So that was my final quote there in terms of the range of what we respond to those, and there's a bit more in the reports that we work from here.
5 slides. It's very difficult to tell your boss that time's up, but 5 slides in 10 minutes, I think it's wildly optimistic. It's usually an hour for you, so pretty good, pretty good. Our final speaker is Margaret Greenwood, who will respond and outline her thoughts on this area. So I shall, without further delay, hand over to Margaret. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Shall I start up?
However you want.
Okay. Thanks ever so much, Dave. It's a real pleasure to be here this afternoon and with all of you, and to have heard these presentations, which I think I've been writing furiously throughout them because they've been so stimulating. Talk about that, but actually it's too much, it's too rich almost. And so I'm just going to make some remarks really about where we are in relation to social security at the moment, and some of our thoughts around this, particularly in relation to disabled people. So we feel very strongly that really the evidence has never been clearer that the social security system has lost its way. So we've had really deep cuts to social security since 2010, causing immense hardship. We're all very aware of that, particularly those of us based up in the northwest here, where we see real poverty and hardship. We've got people who need support being subjected to punitive sanctions regimes, and a number of the speakers commented on this, and it really is striking, isn't it? Because I think, was it Rich was talking about surveillance. I feel very strongly about that. When you think about somebody on universal credit has to complete an online journal to show, to demonstrate how they spent 35 hours a week looking for a job. I used to be a basic skills tutor, and it's one of the many jobs that I've done in my life. I find it profoundly obscene that that's the case, because it means actually your ability to get benefit is dependent upon your academic level, and if you can't read and write well, then tough for you. And of course, people with low literacy skills are by far more likely to be in need of social security than other parts of the population. So I think that of itself is a particularly damning example of that, and you know, when we get elected, we will make sure that we get rid of that. I think there's, you know, there was a major report over 5 years onto conditionality and sanctions, which found, you know, there were no lasting positive outcomes for it. There was a slight bit of evidence that it might push some people into work sooner, but not sustainable work. But it was certainly evidence that it pushed people into crime, for example, to try and survive. People just giving up and saying, this is just too hard, I just can't do it. And so that is in particular something I feel very strongly about. And of course, disabled people with learning difficulties and so forth, particularly hard hit by that. And then we have, of course, disabled people forced to undergo flawed assessment processes to judge whether they are fit to work. And it's really telling, isn't it, the idea that the social security system is going to judge you. The social security system should be there to support you. And I think all of the language needs to be challenged and changed, because the whole premise should be that we're trying to support people when they need it, and that could be any one of us. Any of us could need it at any point in time. So we feel we all have the right to social security when we need it. Yes, our health and education systems are held in high esteem, although of course they're massively under threat. Social security is stigmatised. So just the very fact of claiming social security, people very often don't want to talk about it, feel embarrassed by it, and that's because of how it's been framed by the government. So instead of it being presented as a social good that any of us might need to rely on, government likes to talk. You see the Tories getting okay, oh, it's the taxpayer, you think, well, people who receive social security are taxpayers. What are you talking about? This is about all of us. It's not, it's very deeply divisive, the government's language. And similarly, we want the people who work in the social security system to be held in high regard and to be esteemed in the same way that people talk about nurses. We would like it if people talk about people who administer the social security system to talk in a similar way, because, you know, destitution is serious, isn't it? You know, the people there, and I've met people actually, we're on MP campaign. I've knocked on doors where I've had civil servants. One woman said to me, you know, I went into civil service because I wanted to help people. She said, I know people are coming to me starving and there's nothing I can do. And she was practically in tears. So, you know, similarly, like social workers, you get other people going to DWP because they want to be helpful and they're not given the opportunity to do that. So we feel very strongly that people are being punished rather than their poverty being alleviated, and there's a desperate need to address that. There's been a series of independent reports, many of which I'm sure you'll be, or all of you, which you'll probably be aware of, so the National Audit Office, the House Commons Public Accounts Committee, Quality and Human Rights Commission, and the UN Special Rapporteur on Extreme Poverty and Human Rights, most recently, have all raised major concerns about the way in which social security operates. I'd say that this is nowhere clearer than under universal credit. It was supposed to be lifting people out of debt, but of course it's been pushing people into poverty. This has been very well recorded. Some of the comments that were made, and I think, was it Nori, about, you know, what you can do. I think being active is massively important, and I'm very sort of heartened to hear that people are getting together campaigning on social security, because we need to demand that we can have a social security system that delivers for us. We need to change the public voice around it, so the work that you're doing campaigning is massively important to challenge that, and we all have a job that we can do in that regard. So the UN Special Rapporteur